When people are asking me, well, how do I get started with JV, Sarah? I tell them, stop worrying about the JVs, stop worrying about the deals, worry about yourself. Invest in your own education. Be the best person you can be and be the person you would want to invest your money into.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Property Hustler Show. My name is Andrew, and today Ping and I are joined by a super special guest, Sarah Eder. Sarah Eder is a real estate investor. She is a specialist in JV and raising capital, and she's also a real estate investing coach. Sarah, great to have you on the show.
Awesome, guys. Thanks so much for having me.
Now, Sarah, I want to start off by saying first, I was one of your biggest fans when I was first considering getting into, the social media space, and I started looking at everything you had done, and I was like, wow, this girl has really established herself. You've done some very impressive stuff from, all your joint ventures. You have done a whole bunch of Airbnb type stuff, and your projects look very impressive, and your coaching material is also very good. I tapped into some of it, and I found it very informative. Very impressive stuff. So how did you get into all this?
Thank you so much, by the way. I really appreciate all the nice words. So I actually got started through property management. So a lot of people don't know that I was actually an athlete before I got into real estate. I have no background, like nothing in construction, real estate, anything. And when I had retired from my professional career, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I had this amazing business degree, had never used it for 7 years, and I was not a very employable individual. And so I was really just looking for any type of job that would take me. And one of the companies that actually was willing to hire me was a property management company. And I said, you know what? That's great. I don't care what it is. I'm just I need experience. I need something entry level. And so I started working for this property management company and I fell in love with it. I loved dealing with the tenants, leasing, just learning all the ins and outs of, managing like apartment buildings. I thought it was fascinating. So I started going to some like networking meetups and things like that. And I did it for about a year and a half before sort of starting my own property management company.
That's actually quite the journey. A lot of people, I feel, don't necessarily look at property management as an avenue as further into real estate, right?
Absolutely.
But it gave you a very boots on the ground kind of experience, which is, even makes it more amazing from where you started to where you are now with all the projects that you have going on right now. Like I remember you posted about that other project in Welland. You have a nice big multi-res going in there.
You're right. It was such a great segue like into real estate because I was only 27 actually when I started, and with no capital and no real like experience in real estate, it was hard to attract investors and get that like leg up as just being this young kid trying to like break into the market. And so for me to say, hey, look, like I've got all this property management experience. I know how to run these big buildings. I can handle utility setup. I know how to, tenant these units. It was huge. It gave my investors a lot of confidence, even though it's more kind of like the new kid on the block. And so, yeah, this building in Welland, we're so excited. We've been really focusing in like the mid-multi space for the past couple of years. It's always been my dream to do these large apartment buildings. And we finally decided to pull the trigger. Just been waiting for the right building. Prices have been crazy the past couple of years. So we found this building off market in Welland. And what really attracted us about it was the fact that it had vacant commercial space on the main level. As prices are getting tighter and therefore financing is getting a bit tighter, we were like, okay, we need a way to really get the net operating income and the value of this building up. But how do we do that without turning over tenants and without, which is a little controversial and, a huge renovation budget? Well, we thought this is great. There's already vacant space on the main level. There's commercial space that's not being utilized. And I don't know if you guys know a lot about Welland, but the city of Welland is huge on incentivizing investors to do development right now. So we actually got approval to turn almost 100% of that commercial space into additional residential units. So we didn't have to do minor variants, just basic building permits, and they're letting us add another 4 units to the main level of the building.
Did you guys have any issue with the parking?
We were lucky. This particular building already has 12 spaces, and because they really want to densify the downtown core, like this is right on the main street close to the canal, they actually just waived it. They said, you know what, there's enough street parking. You already have 12 spaces for the existing residential units. Go ahead. We just want to densify, knowing that a lot of these will probably be elderly tenants tenants as well. And a lot of them don't drive. And there's a bus route right on that street. So yeah.
That's one of those things where I can imagine even the relationships that you've cultivated through your past experiences, be it property management, some of your JVs, you can definitely instill a lot of confidence in your ability and capacity to even see these things. Like, this stuff. Most people don't know it. You can have a multifaceted approach to real estate investing. It's not just the building. You're also looking into the city, all the things that they want, right? And you get in line with what the city wants. We sometimes talk about, Ping and I, we talk about how you want to build and aim for what the banks want. Whatever, you can buy something and get what they want. And another level is to look at what the city wants, because that is where you can really get that extra lift on your property value by just being in alignment, right? So that's actually really amazing. I would have tons of questions for you in terms of like how you go about doing things, because it is an interesting journey. But I think one of the questions that a lot of people would have is, how do you go about structuring some of these ventures? Because sometimes people present themselves as if though I'm just a one-man show buying all these, but not realizing the power of the network behind them. And you have a very strong network and a group that you work with. So how does that look? How do you build this and structure it to do the endeavors you do?
I'm so glad that we're talking about this, because I feel like you said, like, a lot of people think this is a one-man show. A lot of people think, oh, I can just have like one employee, or I don't have to network and I don't have to go to groups. I don't need to, meet all of these people. And the one thing I tell people is this is not just a real estate game. It's a people game. To succeed in anything like in real estate, it's all about the people, and you need to make connections. You need to build these relationships. And so when I first started, I focused really hard on just networking, because again, I knew I was this kind of young kid, didn't have a lot of resources. And so I was like, I need to be the sum of like a greater whole, and just try to pull on all of these people that can help me. And so whether that was like my power team in the beginning, like working with like the best mortgage brokers, the best realtors, the best everyone that could just answer all these questions so I could scale up quickly. And then from there, I also hired really early. A lot of people, I think, are scared to pull on staff that early. You're going to go into debt. What's that going to look like on your balance sheet? But I had a mentor tell me in my old business a long, long time ago that even if you need to go into debt and get a business loan to pull on staff, you need to do it, because there's only you can only do so much yourself. So I hired very early. I had my property management company. I delegated there. I hired executive assistants, project managers, like really built out a robust team. I knew very early on, like you said, like there was no way I was doing this just alone. And then of course I've done it mainly through joint venture partnerships. So in the beginning, bad credit, lots of debt, didn't have a lot of capital. Joint venture partnerships were my only way forward. And so I went to a ton of networking events and just built a lot of really good relationships. And so using private money, joint ventures, I've really just been able to kind of form this nice core of money partners that do a lot of our deals. And we do just very like standard JV agreements. Now that we're going into the commercial space, we're getting a little more complicated. Now we're having to pull on multiple money partners at the same time. So we're starting to look into, general partnerships, limited partnership structures, shareholder agreements, a little more complex stuff. But we've built that trust with all of these individuals. A lot of them are repeat JVs from my previous like single family and duplex conversions and things like that. And now we're kind of graduating and they're kind of moving with me, which is kind of nice.
So a lot of people will be interested in knowing like what kind of structure for the active investors. Are you, for this one, are you still using or did you still use a 50-50 structure, or you have a different way because of the size of the deal?
For these size of deals, we actually do a 60-40. So we take 40 and we do 60 to the investor, mainly just because these deals are a little more unwieldy. When we're doing like a fourplex conversion or like a duplex conversion, I can almost guarantee my investors' money back within like 6 to 12 months. Whereas these buildings, we're looking at like a multi-phase approach. So you're looking at, maybe like a 1 to 2 year refi, and then a 3 to 4 year refi. It's like a 5 to 6 year journey. So we're really expecting these people to stick their money in there, be patient and wait. And we're not really able to tell them when they're going to get their first cash flow draws, when they're exactly going to get all of their capital back. So kind of into their benefit, we give them a little more of a cut just so it looks a little more enticing on their end. Yeah.
That's a good way to structure it. Also, it kind of tells people that when you are looking for partners, people that you're going to JV with, you are not looking for somebody who's like looking at real estate as a short-term game kind of play, where I'm going to invest it 1 year, money comes out 1 year, and invest it 2 years and money comes out. It's like people should understand that real estate is a long-term game, especially for some of the stuff that you're doing. It takes time, especially working with the city, building things out. You have to be patient and you have to have the right expectations. So it sounds like as you go through the motions of, your standard JVs and the more complicated ones that you're talking about, that your client base also has an understanding.
A lot of people are talking about like raising capital 100% plus the renovation funds. Like, do you, in your real estate journey, do you ever put in any of your capital towards those projects?
Never.
Never. Okay. Wow. That's a really good way to scale.
You see how she's laughing? She's bragging.
Yeah.
She's bragging.
It's like, nope, just never. And I get that question a lot because I think a lot of people, when they're first getting started, they're wondering, like, how much capital of my own do I need to save up? And maybe they're having challenging conversations with JVs. And I've heard from a lot of people just getting started, they're like, well, how do I convince them to do the down payment and the renovation costs? And I think it's all down to value proposition. And so when people are asking me, well, how do I get started with JV, Sarah? I tell them, stop worrying about the JVs, stop worrying about the deals, worry about yourself. That's what you need to focus on first. Like, invest in your own education. Be the best person you can be and be the person you would want to invest your money into.
That's great advice.
Right. It's like a different perspective shift, because then all of a sudden you're thinking, well, wait, why would I give, my money to this kid when, they don't have this experience or that experience? And, looping back to the whole idea of the property management company, it was great because that was a huge in for me to be like, okay, I don't own a lot of real estate, but look at all of this experience I have. I know a lot of people have gotten their realtor's licenses or mortgage licenses, and that's great. Like, you just need some sort of edge so you can go back to them and say, look, you bring the cash, or I know I'm asking for a lot, but this is what I put in. Here's how I've educated myself. And, you just have to show that what you're bringing to the table is worth that 50%.
And the capital that you're raising is on top of the mortgage that you're raising.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love how much actually you are touching on the property management aspect. I feel a lot of people who graduate into full-time investments and they start doing coaching, they often won't talk about those beginnings, especially when they were, how do I say? Property management is not a glorious profession to be in. Yeah, it's not so glamorous. It's hard work, right? And to be honest, I had no idea. I would take one look at you and I'm just like, no, this girl's high level, But no, you're just like you have boots on the ground. You went there, you dealt with some stuff, so that gives you a ton of perspective. And I bet that makes some of the clients that you've JV'd with, because I'm assuming some of them were from management, right?
That's right.
I bet that gave them a sense of trust with you.
Absolutely. They saw how I dealt with the tenants. And in the beginning, it was just me. I didn't have staff. Like you guys probably started out the same, right? It's like you're the one serving all the notices, collecting all the rent checks. And like it took a while before I was able to hire someone. So even my second building ever was a 5-plex. And we had to do cash for keys because the building was condemned. It was terrible. And the city bylaw wanted us to kick all the tenants out. And so I remember going to this building as just this like lone girl by myself in like one of the worst neighborhoods in Brantford and just knocking on doors, and people just couldn't believe it. But it's like, you just have to kind of do what you need to do in the beginning.
By demonstration, by doing the work, you proved yourself, I think, to a lot of the people that you're working with through the property management experience. Because when you mentioned before, you got to figure out how to sell yourself. You got to figure out how to say some things that if you were on the other side of the table, you'd want to invest in that. Sometimes people will, investors especially, new ones especially, will look at the scale and they see I'm putting in all this money, and then they feel like they're weighing the scale down with all their money, not realizing all the things you put. So as the active partner, you need to start adding, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm doing. And slowly the scale starts to even out for them to actually see what 50% look like. But it's only the inexperienced investors that I find don't understand what's on the other end of the scale. Right? And that's why they have an unrealistic idea as to why you wouldn't be putting in any money. But this is what you teach, right? You teach, your coaching programs largely focus on JV, correct?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So you have a lot of experience structuring this. You know how it's done, and it shows from what you're saying. What do you think is the biggest challenge for people aside from, is it the getting in with no money, or do you recommend people start with putting some money to build relationships? Or what do you think is the biggest challenge in starting to get into JVs?
I mean, I always say like every individual is so different. If I had money, I probably would have tried to do maybe a VTB deal or something like on my own first, just so I could make mistakes without like the time pressure. I was just in a situation where I was impatient. I didn't want to wait and I didn't have any money. So I just kind of dove right into it. So I think depending on each person's situation, if you have zero money or you're not comfortable putting your own money in, it's okay. Like as long as you are investing in yourself, as long as like you're investing in your education and you can show that, then that's fine. But to your point, like I think the biggest hurdle when you're first getting started with JVs is convincing them of your worth if you don't have a track record. So the best thing to do is surround yourself with the right power team. It's kind of like experience by association. So if you're working with like a contractor with 30 years of experience and a really amazing mortgage broker and an excellent realtor and a good property management company, if you don't kind of want to start off on your own, you can at least say, look, I only have 1 year of experience, but these guys behind me have, 25, 30 years. They're my advisors. They're the ones that are going to be guiding me in making all of these decisions. And so if you can educate yourself, surround yourself with a good power team, then your track record means less because, you're showing you're willing to put yourself out there, and you have people around you to kind of guide you.
Yeah, and there's one thing that I want to kind of mention as well is that you mentioned about like investing in your own education, right? Sometimes when we're raising capital, it is really, really important to be able to speak the same language as the investors.
Yeah.
Right? Because sometimes a lot of people, when they try to raise capital, they were just like, okay, here's the deal. I need this much. Right. But the truth is you need to like in the conversation, it's important for all of us to be demonstrating our ability, like what we know and our execution plan. Like in those conversations and without talking about the capital. Once the value gets established, raising capital becomes very easy. We saw that you've been actively building your social media presence. How does that help you raise capital?
I think I get a lot of DMs about this exact reason, lots of young kids reaching out like, I want to raise capital. I want to get into real estate. What should I do first? And it's always two things that I tell them: get on social media and get educated. That's it. Like if you can start with those two things, you can make so much traction. You need the education because like you said, you need to learn how to speak the language. You need to understand what you should be focusing on. But secondly, if you want to attract capital, you need to be found on social media. I even did a poll of my lenders just to prove a point to people. And I had all of them comment on a post and I made them write down what they look for in someone if they've never invested with them before and like someone just reached out to you, what would you look at first? And they all said they would Google you and look for your social media. Sure. That if they can't find evidence that you are who you say you are, you don't have a website or at least a Facebook page, an Instagram profile showing what you're doing on a day-to-day, they would not even blink twice. They would just move on to the next candidate. So that's how important social media is. It's not just a nice to have and, oh, look, I have to dance these reels on TikTok and it's super annoying. Like I don't like reels either, trust me.
But we do them.
But we have to do them. I tell people, I'm like, marketing is not for fun. It's my job. Like I need to put myself out there. This is active advertising for my company. And so I have to treat it like a job. And I invest a lot of money and a lot of time. I have graphic designers, I have video editors, like all these people working on my brand because when I, start raising money for these bigger buildings now and people come to my page, I need to look professional. I need to look like I know what I'm doing. Otherwise, if I have some blank Google page, they're like, who is this girl? She said she's buying all these apartment buildings, but where are they? Like, what is she doing? So
just to segue on this, because I feel that we can definitely relate on this aspect for social media, is that when you start doing it with the intention that you have to, like, I have to make a reel. I am at this property and this renovation's happening. I have to take a picture. I remember I used to judge some of my friends who would go to these places and the first thing they do is they pull out their camera and start taking pictures. I'm like, we're here to do real work. Now what's real work? Now real work is make sure you're taking pictures of it because you almost lose value of the thing that you do, the project that you complete, if you don't showcase it. Every project you can use to teach somebody something, whether even you're documenting. You see some people documenting their marketing strategies when they're listing houses for sale, realtors, right? That's very valuable and that showcases your skill. If somebody was to look you up and say, wow, they're going to do that for my place. Yeah, I want them. Because even to your point earlier, when you were saying that you want to be able to say things that an investor will understand, there's the whole thing about game recognized game, right? So
Yeah.
when you're talking to people, you need to make sure you're speaking the same language and not just talking. You want to showcase the same language, right? You want to showcase you understand it. So I find this very interesting that to the bridging from doing the work, the real estate work, and then showcasing it, right?
Yeah.
And then it's like you sometimes question how much is that is real as you start to, be intentional about it, right? But it's definitely something to overcome. Anyway, that was a segue. I just want to share that because it's interesting.
Absolutely. No, it is.
So Sarah, two questions for you. One is how did you get into real estate and why? Like, did you have any like family or friends influence for you to actually sort of like push you into into this industry? And second thing is, did you hire a coach in the very beginning? Because obviously you started building your personal branding or the company branding very, very early on.
Or was it all the property management influence?
A little bit of all of it. So, yeah, no, like no family or anything. Like my parents, I'm originally actually born and raised in Sault Ste. Marie, but I've been down in the GTA for about 15 years. And my parents have a couple of rental properties up in the Soo, but I feel like it's just something you do. Like, they had like a decent salary and they just kind of, buy a rental here, buy a rental there. I never saw it as like an actual career. It wasn't until I was working for this property management company that I realized that like, wow, you can invest as a career. Like people actually do this. They don't tell you about this in business school or like university. So no, it was definitely just something like, because I was at that crux in my life where I just didn't know what I wanted to do. Like I'd given up my athletic career. I had tried to qualify for the Olympics. And so that was 15 years of my life as a very young person dedicated to one thing. And then it was just gone.
What were you doing for Olympics?
I was in equestrian show jumping. So horses. Yeah.
Wow.
I'm a farm girl. It doesn't look like it, but I am.
You got to send us a picture later so we can like share it. So we just know like, this is where she came from.
Yeah. I like to
That's cool.
freak people out and post it on my Instagram. Sometimes they're like, what is this? Like, what were you doing? And that was not that long ago, like 5-6 years ago. Right. And it was just so weird trying to like forge this new identity. Like I really had no clue who I was and what I wanted to do. And why I loved real estate was I loved the ease of it. I loved that because I was like almost 30. I was like, hey, I need to build wealth quick. Like I don't have time to mess around. I saw the compounding effect of real estate and I thought, okay, this is great. But I remember going, I think my first real estate networking event was RAIN in Toronto. And I was in this room with like 300 people and I was so intimidated. I was so scared. I'm like, I have nothing to offer these people. Like, what do I do? And I just remember everyone being so friendly and like open and they were just sharing all of their experiences and stories. And I thought, I have never, like I came from a competitive athletic background where it's every man for himself. And then I came into this where everyone's sharing their experience and being so like open and willing to help. And, to your point, that's when I was like, I tried to go it alone a little bit. I went to these seminars, got a bunch of experience and said, okay, I need a mentor. I really need to get coached. Mm-hmm. And so I was very fortunate that the owner of the property management company was actually willing to mentor me kind of for free. He wanted me to grow within the company. And so I used to stay late like every Friday for like an hour. He would take out this whiteboard and he'd teach me how to calculate cash flow and how to, run
awesome.
numbers and things like that. Yeah. And that got me pretty far, I think, for the first like year and a half because I was so actively doing it on a day-to-day basis. But then after that, I did see the need for like a formal coach. But to your point, I actually got a marketing and like online coach as opposed to a real estate coach. I felt like I had gotten a really nice baseline of real estate knowledge. I need to bridge that gap. How do I bring this to the public? I need to start raising money. So I took online marketing and I took this it was like a 6 or 8 week course, taught myself how to, post on Instagram and edit my own YouTube videos and things like that, because I felt like that's where I needed to go, was just get my brand out there. Yeah.
So you started off by editing all your own videos and taking a marketing course. And wow, that must have been, it takes a lot of time.
It was, now looking back, I was like, it was great to do and I needed to save money, but it was a lot of work.
I really appreciate you sharing all that experience, right? Because sometimes when we're trying to talk to a newer investor or newer real estate agents even, people are having a lot of trouble overcoming the idea of having to pay for a mentor. Yes, you're paying someone in exchange for their expertise, but you really shorten the learning curve completely.
Absolutely.
And in your case, you didn't even purchase the very first one until you took the coaching from your property management, the owner of the property management company,
Exactly.
as well as the social media
Yep.
marketing.
Your first property, was that, did you get your first property before coaching or after coaching?
It was after coaching.
After coaching.
I was so nervous about that first property. And again, I think this is something people don't talk about. You know, we're so excited to get to the end goal, but putting ink on paper for that very first deal is terrifying, especially when you're doing a JV. You're using somebody else's money, you have their expectations, your reputation on the line. I couldn't sleep at night for like the first week. I was so scared the property was just going to burn down or something terrible was going to happen. And I was just so scared that I was going to do everything wrong. Did I do the right paperwork? Is my JV agreement okay? You know, am I collecting rents properly? Do I need to open a separate bank account? All those
Overthinking
questions,
everything, right?
Overthinking
Yeah.
everything. And so having a mentor was so critical because otherwise I probably would have either botched up that first deal or just never done it at all because I wouldn't have had the right people to ask the right questions to. And that's something important as well to remember is sometimes we don't even know the questions we should be asked.
Know what you don't know,
right?
yeah.
You don't know what you don't know. And having a mentor be like, well, wait, did you think about this? Did you think about should you get a joint bank account? Should it be held in a corporation? And it's like, oh boy, I'm over my head right now.
One of the things I feel that, because even for some of the students that we have that come for house flipping or they want to just break in and do some JVs, one of the things that I hear, which is always kind of funny question, is like, well, what happens if something goes wrong? And I have to ask the question like what? It's like, I don't know, anything, right? And it's like, I ask them the question back and I say, have you ever gone into an exam or a test and gotten 0? Like you failed everything. Every question was wrong. It's like, no, I at least get some right. It's like, okay, you'll probably do decently, especially if you study, right? Even if you guess, you're going to do probably like make some pretty reasonable decisions by reading the question. So how many things can possibly go wrong? Believe in yourself at least a little. So when people are talking about wanting to be able to invest into a property, it is weird when you think that they might not be willing to invest in themselves before they're willing to invest in a property just so that they can educate themselves. And that's the whole thing. You can really shorten the learning time that you need and maybe not learn from getting scrapes and bruises, but be guided through the process, like having a trainer at a gym. It really is.
Yeah.
Right? Somebody to walk you through the whole process. So, I mean,
Your experience in the athlete world really applies to the business, right?
It does.
All the practice, getting a coach and making sure that you're getting good at certain things. Those are all the sweat that you had to kind of put in behind the scene.
Yeah, exactly.
So I can always relate these two. I feel like it's so similar, sports and business.
It is. And people always ask me, like, how does it apply? And everything applies. Like all the habits I built throughout like my entire life apply to business, like that discipline. Nobody needs to motivate me or tell me to get out of bed and do work. I've been doing that my entire life, like up at 6 a.m. and, hustling and just knowing what it takes to be a high level athlete. You don't get to mess around. You don't get to wake up one day, oh, I have the sniffles. Like, I guess I'm just not going to do it. Like, you don't get that luxury. So you know how to push yourself to like that next level, push yourself kind of like outside of your comfort zone, because at the end of the day, real estate is scary. It's going to have risks. And if you're not willing to just get outside your comfort zone, you can't go very far.
Yeah. But at the same time, everything has risks. Right.
Everything
There's also a risk for not investing in real estate.
It's true. Inflation, your money is losing value literally day by day.
I feel now with everything you shared, I have actually a very refreshing outlook on your background and on your history. And it's like, again, the game recognized game. I feel like we have a lot of similarities, which I'm actually surprised about. I didn't know your background in property management, because even for us, when we went in, we realized pretty early that it was building our network, and we can get paid to build our network through the property management. And it gives us, we learn so much. Before, the problem people had were that houses were so expensive and they didn't want to buy. And now people have another problem, which is that they can't buy houses because mortgages are too expensive and they can't afford them. So I feel like people who look at it that way always have some kind of excuse. But one of the things I've seen a few people use to overcome breaking into the market, especially for new investors, is to partner up in JV.
That's right.
Right, which I feel is actually perfect for what you're teaching, because it is a versatile way for people to leverage relationships, leverage assets that people have in terms of, I have a strong income, maybe you have a down payment, and also somebody wants to do the leg runner work, right? So I can focus on my career, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So JVs right now, I think, are critical for being able to venture, break in, and just make things happen. Because the whole thing is that people sometimes just make all the excuses as to why they can't do it. They never do it. But if they just get a piece of the pie, everything, I think, will start to get easier for them. So what do you think? Do you think that JVs right now are even better in terms of people using it to get into the market?
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, I'm a little biased. I always think JVs are a good idea, but it's so true. Like, I think from both ends, like, I think because mortgage qualification is tougher and because the market's a little weird right now, a lot of people are probably struggling to maybe get in, and maybe they don't have a good income. Maybe they don't have a down payment. And so all they can do is be the active partner, invest in themselves, build out a team, and be the sweat equity partner. I think we're going to see a lot more of that coming in the next couple of years. But on the other side, like, you make such a good point. You know, there is someone that is younger or older, has the income, has everything, maybe just lacking the time, or they're scared because, you know, well, the market shifted so quickly from this year to the next. I don't have a property management company. I don't know contractors. Should I do it? Should I not? It's like, well, then just, you know, team up, see where, you know, there's kind of like that symbiosis between the two. You have someone with the knowledge, with the time, with the guts to go and do it. You have the money, maybe not the time or the guts. They're like the perfect complement to one another. And I think that we're even going to start to see different types of JVs start to come too. People who maybe 2 or 3 friends who were pooling down payments together. Like, I actually talked to a group of guys the other day that they wanted to all buy an apartment building, all 6 of them. And they all wanted to be kind of active partners with equity, with money put in. And they all were going to have like a very specific role to play, like, within managing this building. And I just thought, like, wow, that's so cool. We think about this, you know, sometimes as investors, like, there has to be one passive partner and one active. But that's kind of neat that now the younger generation is starting to see almost like this crowdsourcing type of crowdfunding buildings. Because even buying a primary residence, who can afford that in the GTA anymore? Like, you know, 20 somethings. But, you know, if you get 2 or 3 friends, maybe they like rent out the basement or something and they all live togeters before they're married or whatever. I mean, I think it's actually a really cool way. Next level house hacking. Yeah. And I think it's cool that, you know, JVs are becoming more prevalent, because I think it's going to be one of the only ways like the younger generation is going to be able to like crack into the housing market now.
That's in a way unfortunate, but I think it's a reality that we have to be aware of, because even if you don't like it, you have to figure out a way to play the game, right? You just got to make it happen.
And the biggest issue is that do not ever rely on the government to solve that problem. They just keep bringing people in, and then without solving the inventory issue.
Yeah,
that's right.
So, did you hear about those guys who are protesting, the homeowners who are protesting the interest rate hikes?
Yes.
They're getting on blast, right? And the people are thinking like, oh yeah, these people are rich people, and they're saying, oh, it's mostly realtors. Stop whining, stop complaining, right? It is what it is. Sometimes you have to play the game, but it's good to stand up for certain things. But that seems like, you know, a difficult one to fight. You know, it seems greedy. It comes off that way, I think. But they do have a point in a way. There was recently these 4 guys who messaged, and they were interested in house flipping, right? Because we showcased some of our flip projects on YouTube, and specifically in Hamilton, some guys want to know how to break into it. And it was interesting to me because there's 4 people, and they're all from different provinces. And they were asking questions about how to structure partnerships. But one of the things I noticed that they didn't have already figured out is the terms of their venture, right? Because some people, they're just like, we want to all be involved. We want to know how to structure a partnership, but they don't consider there's big learning gaps. And I should actually introduce them to you, because you seem to you know what you're doing here. But there's big learning gaps. Like, people don't understand that you have to have an idea of what you're doing, who's going on title, and also paying people for what they're contributing. Like, if somebody is going on title, that should be valued as a share of some kind.
Absolutely.
And people also will do the construction part. And this will lead me to the next question I want to ask you, which is if you've seen anything fall apart. Because I feel like that's one of the things where people will have challenges that they didn't anticipate and they didn't think about. And one of the ones, in my opinion, that I've seen fall apart is when somebody promises some sweat equity that they failed to deliver. And now you're in some kind of 50-50 partnership. Like, a common one is they partner up with a contractor who he's going to come and do all the work. And then he can't. And one of the hard parts about it is that if they didn't put the money in, like, what I usually recommend is you put the contractor still puts the money in, they pay themselves. At least if they fail to deliver,
They're on the hook.
they're on the hook, and maybe you can just say, fine, you can't do it. Like, life can happen, right? Something can happen. They might get sick. They might hurt themselves. Somebody needs to do the work. So you need to have the money in there.
Yeah.
At least that's what I think, to pay someone else to do it.
I agree.
Right. So what's one of the things that maybe you've seen in terms of a JV falter?
So I've been very fortunate in that I've never had a JV fall apart. We've obviously sold properties and liquidated things here and there, pleasant dissolving of JVs, because we are very clear from the get-go about expectations. And so I think you raised like a really good point that it's the contract is the template, but even preceding the contract has to be the right conversations. You need to get clear. And it's funny because I get the same thing. I get people DMing me like, what if I put in this and they put in that and we do it like this? And I said, no, like before you do this, it has to be crystal clear who is bringing what to the table and how you're being compensated. There's no maybe this, maybe that. It's the whole basis for your JV agreement. And some people do JVs without a JV agreement. And I will always tell you, spend, and it can be expensive. Yeah. It's like, $1,500, $2,000 with a lawyer to draft this up. But what's worth more, like losing friendships, losing hundreds of thousands of dollars, or just sucking it up and paying that $2,000 at the beginning? And sometimes our lawyer even acts as like a mediator. We'll sit down with me and the JV. Maybe we don't agree 100% on like how things should be split. And we always hash that out ahead of time. And the JV agreement is amazing because it has, it's like a 40-page document. It goes through all of these things. And sometimes I like to just give it to my JV and I'm like, here, read through this and have fun. And they come back and they're like, well, wait, what about this? What about that? Look at all these different clauses. And it's perfect because I'm like, great. We just already raised some huge, maybe not like issues, but things that could have turned into massive red flags and problems throughout our JV relationship. And we need to hash those out well in advance of us ever doing a deal together. So yeah, I've heard so many horror stories of people who have just had JVs fall apart, people not, doing what they're supposed to do in the JV, losing money. I've heard of people even taking money and just leaving and, they didn't even get their cut of what they're supposed to be getting, or you're not clear about how that percentage breakdown is supposed to happen. And so everyone just snatches at the pot, takes whatever they can and just, leaves, which is not how that should go down. So it's just so, so important in the beginning that you know exactly who's bringing what that's going to cost, and what happens when things go wrong. I always tell people that half of my JV, more than half, is more about when things go wrong than when things go right. We talk about like what happens if you die, you go missing, I want to sell, you want to sell, like all the horrible things nobody wants to talk about. It's uncomfortable, but more often than not, those are going to be what can destroy your JV from like the inside out.
Yeah, the agreement is the backbone of the relationship, right? Like if there's any issues, okay, at least you have some sort of guidance. And don't try to talk about the guidance when you're having the trouble.
Yes.
Like when you're having an issue, like the conversation is not going to go well. Try to have that challenging conversation in the very beginning and use it as a filter to qualify whether or not you guys are a good fit, right? Yeah. I do definitely notice that a lot of newer investors, when they see the opportunity to take money, they get super hyped up, excited, and then they forget about the most important thing, which is laying everything out.
One of the first times Ping and I made a JV agreement, we went to a lawyer to have it made to us. And we found that it was very incomplete. And sometimes people think that, okay, I'm going to, and it's a natural thought, I feel, for somebody to think, okay, I'm going to go make a JV contract. I'm going to take it to a lawyer who's maybe done this before. And you might find somebody who can do it. Yeah. But then somebody made a recommendation to us saying, maybe you should visit an accountant to help you make an agreement, because most of your agreement is going to have to do with money, disbursements, structuring, payouts, and all these things, right? Exactly. That a lawyer might not, unless they have it from a boilerplate contract, that they might not include in there. Right. And also, if somebody wants to create one, I feel the best way to do it is to make a JV and ask somebody who's actually done them before, because there's nuances, right? Like lawyers, they might have seen the problems happen, but they might not necessarily know what you're trying to do. And that's why it's good to consult with somebody who understands what's the battle plan. What is it that we're trying to make here? Through your coaching, do you provide your students with contracts, with boilerplate templates, or? This
is controversial. I do not provide a joint venture agreement. And it's not because I'm trying to be greedy, and it's not because I don't want to share mine, but it's exactly like what you're saying. My situation is very different from your situation and somebody else's situation. And if you take my boilerplate, and you just take it, because I can't control what people are going to do with that contract. So if they take that verbatim, apply it to their JV, and then come back to me and say, oh my gosh, this whole thing fell apart. It's like, well, it's not designed to be a one size fits all contract. And I do fully, like, wholeheartedly believe that you need to talk to, just like you said, a lawyer and an accountant before you start doing JVs. By no means should you be taking this 40-page document, signing it, and just giving it to a JV and thinking everything's going to be great. In the beginning, I'll never forget, like, my first couple of JVs, I used to spend 5 to 10 hours per JV with my lawyer, because what needed to be explained to me was how the JV actually plays out in real life.
So you're going through scenarios.
We're going through scenarios. We're going through clauses. We're breaking it down, because it's all legalese. It's basically like a foreign language when you're reading it. And then you read something and you think, okay, that makes sense. But you actually really understand how it applies to a real life situation, because that's important. And through doing this over and over and over again, making mistakes, bumping into little problems here and there, we have tweaked my JV probably like 10 to 15 times. Oh, we learned this. Let's never do that again. Oh, let's make sure we add this clause because we want to make sure this doesn't come about, and that just comes from time and experience. So yeah, typically I will give people letters of intent. I'll give them guidance. I'll answer as many questions as you want, but I never like to give people my full template, because I feel like it could be potentially used for ill rather than good.
We're actually the same way. We're okay with talking about how we structure things.
Yeah.
But the moment that it's a new relationship that our students wants to form with the other JV partner, it's like, okay, now you have the guidance, but don't just take our work, because most likely you're not gonna read through every little things and explain every little things with the other party.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
there's also, I think, a degree of responsibility that comes in there. That
due diligence of your own stuff.
Yeah, people need to know, and also you don't want somebody come back to you and saying that, hey, I used this clause in your contract and it didn't stand up, and then might be that they didn't understand exactly what its intent of use is. But I'm assuming you will still advise them on good things that they should generally include
Little
to cover
hidden things that just come from experience. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. One of my favorite ones actually that was recommended for us to include in our contracts was that should a disagreement ever happen, to allow an opportunity for some kind of, I think it's arbitration.
Yes.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
It's just like you have to, it's almost like marriage counseling, right? Where they just say, hey, if you have a disagreement, you have to commit to this time frame to at least try and work things out.
Absolutely.
Which I think is great. It prevents people from just, jumping the gun and shooting from the hip because they're upset about something. And life happens to JVs too.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Where they might have thought that they had this money to invest, but then they might get divorced, they might need to leave the country for some reason and they need the money out, and then they start pressuring you and they didn't have intention on it.
Yeah.
But things can happen. So that's where I feel, in the contract that we made, another thing, when you said that so much of it was if things go wrong, right? We found that some people they were just down to do stuff with us, and then when we showed them the contract, they were just like, you're kind of scaring me.
right,
Like, are you going to murder me in a back alley somewhere?
Like this is heavy, right? And then so what we did was we actually simplified it, put all the good and pretty things in the front, and then we said, by the way, you need to read this part also, and that's in the back, right? And then you should read that later as to what could happen. But at least we found that it was a little more effective like that.
Also, one of the things that you mentioned, which we're also doing it with our contract, is that we have a couple page of summary.
Yes, like an FAQ, right? Almost,
Yeah, because here's the thing, like it is, like you mentioned, it's a completely different language. And I remember when I first time going through the terms with a lawyer, like honestly, I almost fell asleep. There was a lot of things I just couldn't understand. Not the term itself, it's the wording.
Yeah, it's so true.
Another thing that it would be great for any other audience to know is try to make this process as simple as possible for your investors as well. Right, because the truth is, investors don't want anything complicated. They want to know that you're capable of handling the project. The joint venture agreement is going to be fair and it's easy to read.
And the truth is, when people are at the point where they're going to invest with you or JV with you, the contract shows professionalism and shows that you have experience and that you're prepared. However, at the point where they're investing with you, it's not really about the contract. It's about the relationship that you have with them and the conviction that you're demonstrating. So at the point, sometimes people say, well, what if this happens? It's like, it's always better to try to work something out, because the point where you have to litigate it,
it's never worth it.
That point is done, right? Like everything's just like going out the window, right? So the contracts, I think, mainly demonstrate competence, confidence. You've done this before, and it shows your level of professionalism and experience and foresight. Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think a lot of it hinges on the relationship. That's why Ping's saying that you want to make sure to keep things simple to a point.
Yeah.
At least, this is what we're doing. And you can still have the contract at the back, right, of everything.
So Sarah, can we talk about top 3 challenges that you had throughout this journey? Like you've been investing for like 4 to 5 years. I'm sure you went through a lot. The scaling of your portfolio is very quick, which usually come along with some problems.
Definitely.
Can we talk like maybe top 2 or 3 problems that you faced?
No, that's a great point because you're right. It's very different. Like if you build your portfolio over 10 to 15 years, you have time to sort of test things out. When you're moving kind of at breakneck speed, the way we sort of did, you're right. Like you hit some stumbling blocks. And looking back, it's what I always tell my students now. I'm like, get mentorship early, like figure these things out because the roadblocks can hurt a lot. And I learned some things the hard way. So I would say kind of like I was talking about earlier about this being like a people game. Relationship management. I think that has always been a huge challenge. Not that I'm not a relational person because I do have great relationships with, all of the people I work with, but it's managing people's expectations, even in terms of something as simple as responding to text messages, quarterly reports to JVs and things like that, managing just lots of personalities and lots of things going on in the company, right? So that was where I realized I really needed like an executive assistant, an office manager. I was trying to do way too much, way too quick without delegating soon enough. And definitely that has always been a big challenge is how do I utilize my time focusing on the things I need to worry about? Because I always say it's 2 things, finding deals, raising money. Everything else I should not be worrying about. And, just having people that can manage, I would say, because I know you guys answer a lot of property management inquiries and stuff. I'm the same with JVs. I have so many JVs that on any given day, my phone is ringing off the hook with like texts and emails and calls from my JVs who need stuff from us. And that became almost a full-time job in and of itself. And now it is. I have my executive assistant who manages that. But that has always been a huge challenge is just keeping everyone happy, everything running smoothly, contractors getting paid on time, everyone, working in a nice fashion.
Right.
And I would say the other challenge is something that we don't like really talk about a lot, I think, as full-time investors. And that's growing and managing your cash flow expectations. So this is something I love to talk about on like a podcast and stuff like this because it's real talk where when people get started and they start buying portfolios, doing duplex conversions, whatever people tell you on all these YouTube channels, what they don't tell you is that when you quit your 9 to 5, you need that steady income to pay the bills. And so I did what everybody else was telling me to do, bought, duplex conversion after, multiplex after this and that, all equity plays. And then I got, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 properties. And I'm looking at my bank account thinking, where the heck's the money? Like, how am I paying for my own mortgage? Like, this is like, am I being lied to here? Like, who did not tell me that, owning all of this real estate was not going to make me a millionaire in my bank account? On paper, great. But that's a 5-6 year thing down the road. That doesn't help me pay my bills today.
Yeah.
And so that's something I really wish I kind of like learned earlier was that I also needed to focus more on my active income. And had I think maybe it would have been so much of a struggle, like if I had grown my active business first, maybe a bit more and then kept building up the equity. But hey, like this is the stuff you learn like in this journey, right? And it's what I tell kids now that are like wanting to quit their 9 to 5s and do this full time. Like you better have a solid active income. I don't care what it is. Go get your broker's license, go wholesale some houses, flip, do whatever you got to do. But don't just think you're going to go buy doors and doors and doors and doors and instantly just become like a millionaire.
Yeah. Andrew and I were talking about you buy one, doesn't matter what you buy, cash flow, $500 per month. Right now is super, it made the deal already a really great deal, right?
Yeah.
$500 per month. But what happens if there's a roof leak? What happens if the furnace goes out? It wipes out the entire year of the margin. And guess what? Like now your actual income becomes zero.
Yeah.
Negative even.
Sometimes negative, yeah.
I like your point. It's all equity play, but at the same time, we need to combine with some cash flow play along the investing journey?
So we started doing portfolio ventures, and basically what we would do is we'll group people together and we will buy several different properties. And the reason why we decided to do that is to diversify the type of properties that we are purchasing in a portfolio and the performance of it. So for example, some multi-residentials, they will be hard on the acquisition, but they will perform a little better on cash flow.
Right.
And then you have some maybe single family duplex conversions that might bleed on the carry, but you can offset it with the other cash flowing properties. So definitely there is a balance to strike, and I think it largely has to do with who you are and what it is that you're prepared to do. Like some people who are young and maybe you're just like, I don't need money, I can live off of pizza and ramen or something like that. You can make concessions, right? Whatever it is, and then you can do that, or the house hacking thing. But let's say you get a little older, now you have standards, right? I can't do pizza boxes and ramen. I might have like a significant other, a kid. Now you can't compromise some of that cash flow. So I feel that when people are making that decision, they really have to consider that cash flow balance act with, the stage of life that they're in. Right. And that's why I think also partnerships are so important, because they can remove some of those pain points.
That's right.
Right.
Exactly.
A capital partner, a money partner, somebody who's complementing where you
what
are.
You're lacking.
Yeah. Exactly.
Can we quickly talk about your mentorship program?
Yeah.
Because it sounds like you're bringing a lot of good guests or speakers.
This is our free session.
Exactly.
We learned everything here.
Well, obviously, you gentlemen, very excited to have you guys on the mastermind to talk. So we're really excited about this mastermind. I've been coaching for about 4 years. It was never something I intended on doing. It was actually a friend who said, look, you have something to offer. You should teach people how to raise capital. And I thought, I'm a kid. I've only been doing this a couple of years. I don't have anything to share. And then I realized that there's not a lot of millennial capital raisers that are super active on social media. A lot of like older kind of generation people, not a lot, promoting, how to use social media to raise capital, for example. So I thought, okay, you know what, maybe like there is a niche here. And so I've been teaching, quite a few students over the past 2 years how to raise capital. And I got to a point where now, I'm a little more advanced in my portfolio and seeing that there's this interesting gap in investors right now where, compared to where I started 5 years ago, there were no podcasts, there was no YouTube channel like teaching you how to invest in real estate. Whereas now you can get so much baseline knowledge. It's actually incredible. I think it's amazing. All this free content, how to wholesale, how to BRRRR, how to buy an apartment building. It's so amazing. But then what's happening is people are taking these entry-level courses and then getting to a point where they have a couple properties under their belts. They figured it out on their own. And now they are just stuck. They want to quit their job. They want to do this full time. They're just lacking that real how-to about the scalability. When do I delegate? How do I delegate? How do I get more capital into the playing field here? How do we scale up into larger buildings? And so I saw this huge need for these like intermediate real estate investors that don't need to be taught like the general theory. They need the how-to, like how do I raise money?
Actionable things.
Yeah. Like nobody with 5 properties who wants to quit their job is coming to me saying, can you teach me the theory of a BRRRR? There's like, well, no, how do I go and, buy an apartment building? What do I need to do first? So
scaling problem.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's all those like scaling issues that I just recently went through only like a few years ago. So it's very fresh in my head. And so I wanted to create this group that it's not very big. It's only like 20, 25 students, but where it's very tailored and very actionable. So we have some really cool guest speakers coming on. There's going to be myself plus 4 other coaches where we take like a really one-on-one approach to every student. We're going to do in-person, site visits and tours, networking events and things like that. Really like giving them all like these very curated tools that intermediate investors like really need to know to be able to kind of get to that next level.
That's awesome. It is going to be a 12-month program.
Yeah.
Can you quickly walk us through how each week is going to look like, or each month is going to look like for the students?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we figured a 12-month is an ideal length because that's about the time that people can really absorb a lot of knowledge and then still be taking action while getting support from the coaches within the group. So essentially it's going to be 3 sessions, group sessions per month. Those will be virtual. They're going to get 2 one-on-one sessions with their own coach. They're going to have the same coach for the entire year. So that's going to be their dedicated kind of accountability coach. And then every other month we'll be doing a different kind of surprise in-person event. So sometimes it'll be a seminar. Sometimes it'll just be kind of a fun social networking events.
Spice it up, yeah.
Yeah, spice it up. Keep it fun. Absolutely. Yeah.
And actually, just by everything that you've shared, I can already tell that there's going to be a ton of value from it, and you are nailing the problem on the head. I think people have access to all the theory. People have access to the ideas behind everything, but people today need tailoring. People have taken some of the steps, and they just need to know how this looks for transitioning, right? And I think a lot of it will obviously be you have to just do it, right? Just stop second guessing yourself and just. We should all be wearing Nike shirts. I say that all the time, but that should be the real estate brand. Just do it. It sounds like you're going to be covering a lot of stuff, and we're really excited to be at your next event there, so we can talk about it too. Especially since you came from the background that you did, because different people have different obstacles, different roadblocks that they're trying to overcome, and they really just need to stop listening to the ideas behind it and really get to the brawn of how you do it. So I think that'll be very interesting. Good to share. Okay, so Sarah, listen. Now that we're coming to the end of everything, I want to ask one question before we wrap it up, which is, if there was anything you would do differently now, having the experiences you have, what's the biggest thing, the number one thing that you would have approached differently from when you started? Such
a good question. I could think of so many things.
So
many. But honestly, it probably would have been getting better mentors sooner and just spending the money. A lot of times it was like I didn't have $10,000 to go spend on a mentor, but I feel like I could have found it somehow, some way. And, having talked, and everyone probably listening to all the little mistakes I made with these JV contracts and, messing up deals and things like that, I feel like I just never would have made those mistakes, when to delegate and all that stuff. I feel like I really could have smoothed out my journey. So, if it's like putting sweat equity into with a flipper, or just, working for a property management company, working for a realtor, whoever you can get mentorship from and just get that hands-on experience, it will make such a difference.
Especially if you can get that mentorship and get paid to do it.
Exactly. Even better.
And that goes back to what you were saying earlier on the show about hiring someone pretty quickly along the way, right? Hiring a coach is sort of it's the same as hiring a consultant. Sometimes you do want to hire to where you want to be, and not wait until you're stuck and then hire again, because then all of a sudden you're losing all the opportunity costs in between.
Exactly. Absolutely.
So Sarah, we are going to be leaving some information on the platform about how to join your courses and also some of your upcoming events. But if somebody wanted to reach out to you and just say, hey, if they have any general questions, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
So I'm pretty easy to find. My handle is the same across all channels. It's just at Sarah Eder Invest on Instagram and Facebook.
Okay, perfect. So we're going to leave that somewhere here on the screen. Great. And if you have any questions for Sarah, by all means reach out. Obviously, super insightful. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, review us if you're watching on a podcast platform, and we will see you on the next one.